so often as Democrats, we have treated the presidency like it's the only position that matters. And that has come at our detriment because the reality is, if you can't win a school board race, you're probably not going to win the Senate race. Let's be clear. If you're having trouble picking up mayoral seats, it's going to be difficult to build the type of political infrastructure that's going to be necessary if you want to win a governor's race or if you want to win at the presidential level.
Hello, everybody. Today on Duke's Download, I'm joined by Malcolm Kenyatta, Vice Chair of the Democratic National Committee, Pennsylvania State Representative, advocate for working families, and a powerful voice for LGBTQ plus rights and racial justice. His work centers on equity, economic opportunity, and on building a more inclusive political future. I'm so excited because I'm a huge fan, and I'm just excited to hear his insights on leadership, on representation, and what it takes to create lasting change. So welcome, Malcolm. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you.
It's so great to see you. It's been a long time since I last interviewed you. I think I interviewed you for my Instagram Live series back in 2020. And it's funny because, I know I'm doing this as more of a, proper podcast. Before it was just sort of Instagram Live interviews. I uploaded to YouTube, and I've tried to mostly focus on interviewing like new people because I don't want to repeat the same interviews over and over again. But with you, number one, I think you're literally one of the most talented people in American politics. Number two, you've had a massive amount of change in the last 5 years in terms of, the trajectory that you've been on. So I thought you were one of the people that I was like, okay, I have to, if he's gracious and willing enough to sit down with me, I have to talk to him again. So,
well, we
really
love a double dip on Duke's Download, right? We love the alliteration. I love being a repeat guest, and I'm so excited for you and what you're doing with this new format. So I am pleased to be back with you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Really, thank you. In terms of the change that's occurred over the last 5 years, obviously, last year you were elected vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. You're still in the Pennsylvania State Legislature, though you're serving in both roles currently.
8 years. Right? That's right.
What was it? I mean, obviously, there are some obvious things, I guess, in terms of why you decided to run for vice chair, given the critical moment that we're at, both as a party and as a country. But what was it about running for that particular position? What was it that made you say, this is the position that I want to run for at this moment in time?
Well, you know what? In some ways, I would push back in this tiny way. It was not obvious for me at all. I mean, I'd never been involved in the organized party structure, even at the local level. I'd obviously run for office, know all those folks, but I've never been involved or elected to political office. And what changed for me, obviously, was what happened in the last election. I was the Democratic nominee for Auditor General, which is one of the statewide elected positions in Pennsylvania, deals with, corruption and making sure our money's being spent legally, all those different things. And in that race, got the second highest vote total of any Democrat to run for Auditor General ever. But then this guy named Donald Trump came and got the most votes of any person to run statewide in Pennsylvania ever, and carried the down ballot Republicans statewide with him. And I say all that to say that so often as Democrats, we have treated the presidency like it's the only position that matters. And that has come at our detriment because the reality is, if you can't win a school board race, you're probably not going to win the Senate race. Let's be clear. If you're having trouble picking up mayoral seats, it's going to be difficult to build the type of political infrastructure that's going to be necessary if you want to win a governor's race or if you want to win at the presidential level. And I felt like it was critical for the DNC to have somebody who, A, understood what it means to run for office at the statewide level, to run as a local elected official, but also someone who is still in this role. I mean, one of the great benefits, I say, to being elected official and being in the DNC role is that, like, I get a constant focus group, okay? Like, if my neighbors see me at the grocery store, if they see me at church, if they see me walking down the street, they are going to tell me what they think, what they feel, what they know we should be doing, the broader we, in terms of their elected officials to make their lives better. And I think that ongoing conversation with my neighbors is really critical. And then in the converse, if we're ever gonna be able to deliver on raising the minimum wage to an actual living wage, on putting people in a position where they can go to the damn doctor if they're sick, retire when the time comes, have a good family sustaining job, open a business. The list is endless. If we're going to actually do any of those things, we have to solve the political math problem that is politics. You need a certain number of votes in the House, a certain number of votes in the Senate, and you need a governor or president, if you're talking about the federal level, that's willing to sign that legislation. So I have to change the political math to change the reality for the people who I serve.
What was that like? Because I remember very well. I was a huge supporter, and I was really hoping that you'd win the primary when you ran for Senate in Pennsylvania in
Me too.
2020. Obviously, or was it 2022? Sorry, 2022.
No, fuck it.
Did you run it
It was
2020 or
20,
2022? Senate.
22.
It was you ran. I remember you ran in the primary with John Fetterman and Connor Lamb, right?
I remember.
I remember. But what was interesting to me was I was curious. What was that? As someone who, as you mentioned, had never been part of the party apparatus before, going from being obviously an elected official and a prominent person in the party, but making that transition from being sort of on the outside to now serving on a role where you're part of the party infrastructure. What was that experience like? And has it been I know there's obviously, like with any political party or any infrastructure, there's always going to be debates and different factions and all that. But what has that experience been like for you? That new perspective that you've had being a vice chair of the party?
Well, I walk in this with the same perspective I carry everywhere. And really, it's a quote that guides so much of my life that I take from the reigning Super Bowl champion MVP, Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts, who is fond of saying, we have to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing for me is that government should be in the business of making people's lives better. And everything we do has to be organized around achieving that goal. And so for me, I have walked in laser focused on that as my North Star, and doing it in a moment where Democrats definitely felt like we were down on the mat and felt like, what is the path forward? And I think the path forward for us is pretty crystal clear. First of all, we have to contest races at every single level: mayor's races, school board races, county commission seats, people who run to lead the public utilities across the country. Wherever there is an opening, we need good people to step up and run. But then we have to support those candidates, and we have to support them by making sure, as I sort of alluded to before, that the party is doing what its main job is. And our job is to build enduring campaign infrastructure, right? Because candidates come and go, the issues of the day change, but the things that you need to do in a campaign are static, right? You have to get people to vote for you. And obviously there are a ton of things that are under that the party is engaged in: the fundraising apparatus, making sure we have the correct information to actually reach people, reaching people with a message that is in line with the things that are happening in their damn lives. And then making sure that we have staff and professionals who understand how to organize, how to engage, how to manage races and campaigns. All of that work is not really sexy. It's not interesting to people on a daily basis, but that is the work that makes the difference between winning and losing these races. And if you look at what the DNC has done, one of the statistics I'm most proud of is that the DNC's investment in our state parties has gone from about 8% a year ago to 24% under this new leadership team. And what that has meant for our state parties is that they have now, all of our state parties now have full-time offices, right? Because if you are in a red state where you have, a very tight budget, maybe you say, oh, we don't need an office, we'll do everything digital, but then you don't have a hub where people can come together. Making sure people can actually have year-round staff, because the issue of campaigns is that so often campaigns and state parties, you're scaling up to hundreds of staff during the height of the presidential election. And then after the presidential election is down, all those people go away. And then you're in this constant rebuilding. And that takes time. That gets us away from having the conversations with our neighbors that we need to have. But it's not something you can ignore, or avoid doing. This is the basic sort of blocking and tackling. And so I think about a lot of this, and I'm using now two football metaphors, but that tells you where my head often is. A lot of times we're just focused on the quarterback, right? Who is the person whose name is on the ballot? But there's an entire team that's around them, people who make sure the jerseys are washed, and that get the team to the actual stadium on time, folks who are calling the plays, all of these different roles. And we want to make sure that those roles are contain the people with the highest levels of integrity, the highest level of expertise in the areas. And we just announced something we're doing to today that's right in line with that, where we are going to be training staff across the country who can then go in and work in down ballot races. Because if you're running for school board or mayor or county commissioner, sometimes it's so difficult to even get high quality staff because they want to work on the high level races, or you have people who want to work on these smaller races but don't feel like they have the expertise. So we've invested 6 figures into helping build out that human capital. And then the second piece is we need to do everything that we can, and I mean it, everything that we can, to put ourselves in a position where people are raising their hands to actually step up and run for office. And so we're going to be building out pipelines in partnership with, many partners to say, how can we be constantly infusing the pipeline of candidates with new, young, dynamic people who never considered, maybe even running for office, because our government, our country, it should be run by us. And it has to be run by working people on the ground who know that the impact of the policy decisions that we make are not some hypothetical intellectual exercise, but it is real. And if we don't have good people who step up, then we get the assholes who are currently in office. They step up every time, unfortunately.
They do, and for all the wrong reasons. You're right. But they're seeking power and ego boost and whatever else, money, financial, enrichment. I was watching an interview that Gavin Newsom just did recently with Ezra Klein for the New York Times, and look, it goes without saying, but of course, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. But putting his views aside, one thing that Gavin Newsom and Ezra Klein were talking about was the one thing you can't take away from him, and what Turning Point USA has done is they built this incredible apparatus where a lot of people doubted whether in the end it would actually the work that he was doing would work, or whether it would be effective. And in the end, I guess it was, because in a lot of these states, Turning Point USA, even though I vehemently disagree with virtually everything they represent, they've done a great job of mobilizing youth and organizing. And so I think everything that you're talking about is music to my ears, because I think there has been a big question since the last presidential election as to whether the Democratic Party would, whether there would be changes made that reflected that need for more investment in the state parties and in organizing and in mobilizing youth, both in terms of having them working on campaigns, but also running as candidates themselves. So I think, and Governor Newsom and Ezra Klein were talking about, what an incredibly impressive, just objectively, what an impressive organizing apparatus Turning Point has become. So I think it's amazing and very encouraging to hear that the Democratic Party is saying, okay, like, we need to focus not just on the presidential, but on building an organizing apparatus for all levels of elections.
100%. And I'd ask you to think about it in this way. We have 3,143 counties across this country, okay? 3143. In 2024, there were 20,000 uncontested races on the ballot, 20,000 uncontested races. 80% of those 20,000 races, which reflected about 2,000 counties, give or take, across the country, 80% of those races were uncontested by Republicans. Only 20% were uncontested by Democrats. And so when you look at that about 2,000 counties spread, from a geographic perspective, I'm not talking about population, from a geographic perspective, a majority of the folks talking about Democrats aren't Democrats, it's Republicans who are talking about Democrats. And so when you aren't building out the infrastructure, not to just respond to what other organizations are out there doing, but to respond to the real necessity of what it takes not only to win, but what it takes to earn people's votes, what it takes to deserve to win. If you don't show up in somebody's community, not just with your hand out and saying, hey, vote for me, but with real interest in what is happening in your neighborhood, what are the things that matter to you, and not from an outsider and swooping in, but to have people on the ground raising their hand saying, you know what, I live in this neighborhood. I also care about the fact that we have a local school that needs, repairs that have been put off for a long time. And I want to get my neighbors together to do something about it. You know what? I live in this neighborhood. I care about whether or not my neighbors can go to the goddamn doctor when they're sick and have the capacity to afford the prescription when they leave that appointment. And you know what? I'm going to raise my hand, run for office, and then collectively we're going to do something about it. In this moment, a part of what Donald Trump has benefited from and what we have to rebuild is this basic sense of what it means to be a neighbor, what it means to actually give a damn about what's happening down the street, and also understand the interconnected nature of it. If we're not talking to each other, then demagogues and special interests and people who don't care about building sustainable, strong communities, those people fill the void. And so when I think about the 3143 problem that we have, that the county perspective, and ensuring that in 2028, we are not in a position where the only Democrat on the ballot is the person running for president. We can't repeat that. It is a huge mistake. And from a pure strategic perspective, right, we understand that you're not going to flip every single one of these races, but you put Republicans in a position where there's no terrain that they have to, that they can go see as undefended, where they have to defend every single race. And we saw it in Tennessee, where my good friend Afton Bain, took a district that Trump had won by 22 points just months ago and put it in single digits. You had Donald Trump and his aligned super PACs spending millions and millions of dollars on a race that they should have never had to think about. And it's because Afton raised her hand and said, you know what? Groceries are too damn expensive. The ability for you to buy that first home is out of reach for far too many people. And we have this jagoff in the White House who is using every mechanism of government to enrich himself and stuff his pockets, while the average person can no longer afford their life. That is what is at stake in this moment. And we as a Democratic Party have to be in a position where it's not just talking heads on cable news that is saying what Democrats believe, but it's people where you live, where I live, talking about what it means to be a Democrat in our communities. Because a lot of people say, how do we fix the Democratic brand? How do we get to a point where a majority of the American people, trust Democrats as the party of working people? We're not going to TikTok dance our way to that reality. We're not going to CNN news panel our way to that reality. The only way you build that trust is recognizing that people don't join organizations. People join people. People join people. And if there are no local people who are proud Democrats, who are talking about what they want this party to be, then there's nothing for the average person to, connect to, and they have to settle for the talking points that are on cable news.
I know this is a very broad question, but very broad, but for you personally, what are the most, this is almost an absurd question to ask because it's like,
Oh, do it. Definitely have to talk.
But how, for you personally, I mean, I can hear you, like whether it's on healthcare, I could hear obviously And I agree with you that that's among the most urgent, pressing challenges that we face in this country. But for you personally, what are the main issues that are animating you in terms of like these are the issues we need to prioritize as a party, but also if the Democrats take power again in Congress and the presidency. For you personally, what do you think the main issue or issues are that need to be addressed?
So I will stick on healthcare, and I don't know when this will go live, but on December the 15th, which is today,
Mhm.
Americans who are in the affordable care, whatever it's called in your state, in Pennsylvania, it's called Penny, others, but that marketplace, you have till today to decide whether or not you're going to re-up for your healthcare plan next year.
Mhm.
Because of Republicans' refusal, their absolute refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which was putting people in a position who could not afford care to actually afford it. You are going to have, on average, and there are a lot of different people who've pulled out different numbers, but if you look across the academic research on this, about 4 million Americans have healthcare as we're having this conversation, but will not have healthcare come January 1. That means there are prescriptions that they need right now that are going to go unfilled.
Mhm.
That means that there are rural and hospitals in major cities that have depended on the new influx of people getting primary care doctor, coming in for their checkups, doing all the preventative care things that good quality healthcare allows you to do that aren't going to have those patients. And so for a lot of people, we're shifting back to the hellscape that was prior to Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, where for families like mine, and this is true for me growing up, when I was really sick, you went to the emergency room. You didn't call a primary care doctor because you didn't have no damn primary care. You went to the emergency room.
Right.
Emergency room care, obviously, it is more difficult to give people the type of ongoing care that they need in an emergency room. It's more expensive for everybody. The wait times are already egregious for everybody. And so the reality of this, when you take all of these things and you sort of tease them all out, is that tens of thousands of people are going to die every single year because of this.
Nope.
And I wish that this was one of those things where, like, here's another politician just saying some hyperbolic shit to like make their point. This is real. Tens of thousands of people are going to die, and this administration does not give a solitary fuck about it.
Nope.
Literally, the president just yesterday said his number one priority is building an arch somewhere in DC that's named after himself. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? I cannot understand for the life of me, and just from pure political perspective, how this could be the number one priority.
Right.
When a majority of the people who are on the Affordable Care Act, by the way, are in these quote unquote red states.
Right.
And so it's people who trusted Donald Trump who are getting screwed the most. I will say two other things quickly.
Oh.
Because of the president's complete inability to actually manage the economy in a sustainable, common sense way, and to not use this country's economic power to leverage deals that corruptly benefit himself and his family. And we should be very clear when we talk about the economic decisions that this president is making. He's not just dumb, though he is. He is making decisions that are about corruptly enriching himself. Just take, for example, the tariffs. Yes, the tariffs are a bad economic strategy. Yes, the tariffs just this year have cost the average American $1,400 more from the taxes and the increase in the prices of goods. But also, he has turned the tariffs up and down like he's, fucking with the volume in the car, because it has benefited him and his family. And they've made deals around the economic impacts of it, whether it's knowing that he was going to do the tariffs in advance. We saw some Bitcoin schemer make $125 million in 3 minutes because Donald Trump threatened tariffs on China, and that person was able to short sell a bunch of Bitcoin. And this all done anonymously. And so we didn't know who this is. But for somebody to have pre-knowledge, clearly they work with or for this presidential administration. You have folks like Qatar giving the president a $4 billion plane, and then he is allowing Qatar to open and U.S. a base in America, in Idaho. They're opening a Qatari military Air Force base on the United States soil because the president was given a plane. And the list goes on and on and on of how he has traded away our national security, our financial security, and the future of folks in our generation to benefit himself. And then the final thing, frankly, is connected to what I've been saying before. But we don't deal with the corruption, the reality that right now, active members of Congress can trade stocks. They're day traders while they're in Congress. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
I agree.
We're in a position where over and over and over again, you see the most egregious examples, not limited to the president, but all across government, where people get to play by a different set of rules if they are in elected office versus what the average person has to do. And if we don't restore that trust, then we don't have a government that's for the people, by the people. We have a government that's for the billionaires, for the multimillionaires, and for the now trillionaire Elon Musk over all the rest of us. That has to be our priority from my perspective, a wholesale overhaul of how we look at the corruptive practices that have made it difficult for a government to actually be focused on the three words that I think should animate our party government. Our job is to make people's lives better, not to make billionaires richer, not to make Donald Trump happier, to make our lives better. And right now, we don't have a government that's achieving those outcomes.
No, and to me, I by the way, I think you're on every front, 100% on the money when it comes to the need for focus on healthcare, on affordability. I also think, I often think to myself how insane it is that anyone could ever have the temerity to ever say the words Biden crime family or Clinton crime family ever again. Okay, first of all, I think that in both of those cases, it was, debunked or discredited, all those claims. I mean, 40 years of Clinton conspiracy
It's just
theories?
bullshit.
Bullshit. But even if you believe, or if one were to believe that there was, in either of those cases, there was some legitimacy, the fact that even when it comes to our foreign policy with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Ukraine, so not only the Middle East deal, which, by the way, I mean, when you think about what Trump said, that we're going to basically do an ethnic cleansing and turn Gaza into
He wants to build Trump hotels.
Yeah, I mean, that alone is both morally reprehensible and just insane, both in terms of the corrupt, obvious corrupt, dealings there. But also now we find out that in Ukraine, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have their dirty fingers in that deal too, trying to make money off of that. So for me, it's just like, it's just mind-boggling. It's completely mind-boggling that anyone would ever, and then they're doing it in plain sight, and that there are still people, after all that, who are going to go back to these old, narratives about Hillary Clinton it's just beyond me. It's beyond me.
Yeah, and it's nonstop, the corruption, and you mentioned what's happening in Ukraine, and you're absolutely right. They're literally in Miami meeting with the foreign minister of Russia or one of his proxies, talking about how they can be the first in on reinvesting into Russian oil and whatever the hell else. And then you look at the absolute devastation in Gaza, the pain that families are going to never ever, generations that are never recover. And he is here not thinking about how do we actually build a two-state solution where there is real the ability for Palestinians to have a life, to choose their government, to rebuild their homes after this war, which has been far too long. But the president doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about the humanitarian crisis that's there. He doesn't care about folks who have lost loved ones and are asking the tough questions about American foreign policy and on and on and on. All of this is just about how does he build some more hotels. He said it during the campaign that, this is beachfront property and he wants Trump hotels there. And, some of the stuff, if it wasn't so, consistent, I mean, if you were like writing a book, you would have had your editor say, dude, this is too much. Like nobody would believe this. But this is our reality. And literally today's Monday, last Monday, it was announced that the Department of Defense gave a $630 billion loan, the biggest loan in the history of the Department of Defense. Hear me on this, $630 billion to a company that is connected to Donald Trump's son. This is our money.
Yeah.
This is our money.
Mm.
And it is in every single agency, in every aspect of how we utilize our authority as a national, international leader. All of it is not centered around our values, our humanitarian values. It's not centered around what should be our values of seeing less war, more peace around the country. It's not centered around how to deal with, the geopolitical issues that are created by a lack of healthcare, a lack of economic opportunity all across the world. All of it is about how do we make Jared Kushner, Donald Trump, and the little band of buddies around them, how do we make them richer? And so it should be no shock to nobody that just yesterday, I guess it was Huffington Post, is reporting that the president is already weighing giving pardons to his family and his inner circle already. I mean, we're not even out of the first year and they believe they need pardons. That's because they're committing a bunch of fucking crimes. Okay. That's when you get a pardon. So just so people who don't know, you get a pardon when you've committed crimes. Okay. By the way.
Without a doubt. I mean, and you're right. You're in and we're already where we're at. Actually, that goes to my final question. There was a period about a few weeks ago where before the November off-year elections where, to be honest, there was a moment maybe for the first time in my life where I started, or first time in this 10-year national nightmare we've been living through, where I actually thought for a second, I hate to admit it, let me preface it by saying I feel differently now. But there was a moment where honestly, I started to think, wait, maybe they've won. Like maybe we are starting to, maybe there is no coming back from this. But I have to say, I'm very happy to say that not just due to the elections that we have, but also just due to some of the legal, setbacks that they've experienced and some of the, I would say the win that the Democrats had in terms of the public perception fight on the shutdown, making the legitimate point about how people are going to be affected in the real world tangibly by these subsidies lapsing. I feel like the momentum has shifted. And so one other issue I wanted to get onto, I know we don't have time for it, but I wanted to ask you about gun reform. But in terms of healthcare, in terms of gun reform, in terms of affordability, in terms of dealing with the corruption and ethics issues in government, do you feel optimistic about the future, or because I've started to feel more optimistic, but I gotta say there was a period not too long ago where I was feeling pretty bad. I gotta say, but I was curious as somebody, do you feel when you sit down, is the prevailing feeling optimism? Is it dread? Is it how are you honestly feeling right now about, given all the challenges we have, but given the momentum that we've had as of late?
I would say this: hope is a renewable resource, and when you're down and like feeling the inevitable weight of the constant onslaught of nonsense and just cruelty that we see out of this administration. I think about Rob and Michelle Reiner, just brutally, murdered, and they were just giants, incredible human beings. And you look at the president's comments today about their death, and it is easy to see the inhumanity that resides in most powerful position in the world. Aside from all the stuff that's happening.
I've always found it hard to believe that not only does a person that cartoonishly malevolent even exist, but the fact that that person became the most powerful person on the planet, you just go, how is that even still to this day, a decade later? Every day I wake up and with the Rob Reiner thing, which by the way, I had a friend of mine who didn't vote for Trump, but is more, let's say, more uh, pro Trump than I am. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
And I'm definitely fully anti-Trump. But he actually called me this morning and was like, you know what? I think this hard to believe that it took this long, but he was like, you know what? This did it for me. Like that tweet there or that truth or whatever. There is no way anyone with a shred of human decency can look at that and come away with anything but going, this guy is morally bankrupt and it's just a terrible human being. There's no other way to put it.
Absolutely. And there's no way to like look at that and see it constantly in ways that are this visceral and human, and also ways that are structural and profound, like what he's doing to the country. Could spend a whole day just listing what he's done. There's no way that you don't have moments where you feel like hope is lost, where you feel like, the game, the game here is just too far, one side, that you can't come back. But the story of America is one that is as painful as it is poetically beautiful, of people fighting back against every single odd, understanding how far we have strayed from what our values should be, this idea of freedom, justice, and fairness, making it actually mean something, how far removed we were from it when those words were written, and how much we've pulled this nation kicking and screaming to making those words real, and then how far we seem to be dragged back. And so there is this two steps forward, one step back, or one step forward, three steps back, however you want to look at it, that we've always been in. But what gives me a lot of hope, is that people are stepping up. And I don't just mean stepping up to run for office, but just being reminded of their own humanity. People who are looking at how I can help. And this happened in Australia, but seeing that gentleman whose name, I apologize, escaping me right now, who looked at that horrific anti-Semitic massacre that was taking place and didn't just sit on the sideline. He jumped in to try to stop more people from losing their
I cried
lives.
when I read that story because I said, I
The
said
first
I
day of
spoke
Hanukkah, just horrific.
I was just well, and not only that, not only obviously the event itself and the shooting, but which was in itself a horrifying and emotional experience reading and watching all the footage but then the man, I believe he was a Muslim man who
Yes.
intervened. That video of him, I mean, and to think, given this national and international dialogue we're having, where people are constantly being pitted against each other, Muslims versus Jews, I mean,
And seeing humanity, people are stepping
Yeah.
up for each other.
Right.
And dude, that has been my experience all the time. That when you strip away the nonsense and the noise of politics and get back to rebuilding what it means to give a damn about each other as neighbors, that hope, that's renewable. And a lot of people felt what I felt when you felt watching that, of that dual feeling of, oh my gosh, like look at anti-Semitism and hatred rearing its ugly head yet again in this horrific way. But then you have the counterbalance of, look at this person who had kids of their own, who could have just said, let me just hide and get home to my kids, who decided to step in because he cared about what was happening to somebody else's family, what was happening to his neighbors. That is who we can be at our best. I believe that is who we are going to be. And I'm going to say this final point that is more political. The one thing that has come out of Donald Trump's destruction of our country, destruction of our education system, destruction of our healthcare system, destruction of our system of law and order, is it's allowed us to have imagination again about what we build in its place. Because what we can't do is to say, well, before Trump got out here, everything was great. And so let's just, restart the system.
Right.
We have an opportunity to unplug the whole damn game. Yes, he broke it, but you know what? It was broken a long time ago. He's made it worse, but now we're in a position where we can envision a country where you can work one good family sustaining job that gives you what you need to own a home, where you can send your kid out of the front door of that home that you can afford to a good, fully funded public school, where if they get sick or you get sick, you know that you can go to the doctor. And then you can retire with a level of dignity and decency. That is what this is about. The personalities, the nonsense, the noise, everything else is secondary to that. And if we keep that the main thing, and if people step up with imagination, with hope, then I have no doubt about what we can accomplish and what we can build in the wake of this destruction.
Well, folks, I think you just saw it. Why Malcolm Kenyatta, excuse me, I think is one of the leaders, both currently and for the future of our party and our country.
Thank you, my friend.
I'm such a fan, and sorry, I was so excited.
No, thank you for letting me double dip on Duke's Download. Okay, I
You're
should
much
trademark
better
that. Honestly, all that
I am. I was
information.
like, what? Thank you so much. You have no idea. I think right there you just exemplified why I think you are and will continue to be one of the great leaders in our party. And I'm so
Thank you, my
grateful
friend.
for the time. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you, my friend.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you for joining me today on Duke's Download. This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by me, Duke Mason, and produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig. Original music composed by Nell Balaban. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It really helps others to discover the show. I'd love to stay connected with you, so join the conversation by following me at James Duke Mason on Instagram and X, or by emailing me at questions@dukesdownload.com.